Hey everybody, welcome back. Today we are having a conversation, myself and Theodor Panayotov from Ethermind. We've been talking with each other for probably a year now, where we've been talking about AI, the future of AI, particularly the startup tech space, and how the agility of the startup tech space is really shaping what enterprises are able to do in the AI space. So welcome, Theo.
Thank you, Ash. Thanks for having me.
I'm sure this is going to be an amazing conversation. Let's do it,
Yeah.
right?
Let's
So
go.
let's start off with the concept of a value chain. So one of the things I've been talking about a lot over the last few months, really, with different people, is that businesses have a value chain. So the value chain of a business is how they add value to the sector, how they ensure competitive advantage, how they take inputs, or whether it's products or services, and they process those based on the things that are unique to their business. So it might be that they have proprietary tech. It might be that they have particular experts or skills. It might be that they've configured their processes in a particular way that's advantageous. But there will be a sequence of things that a business can do from their inputs that produce outputs or outcomes that the market values. And that's how businesses tend to get. And when we think about value chains, we can think about that end-to-end kind of view of a business. But we can also think about, well, what are the enabling functions that are required to make that value chain work, even if they're not specifically part of the value chain? So people and skills are part of a value chain, whereas functions like L&D that help to develop or enable those people and skills, they sit as a support function to the value chain. So that's kind of how I'm conceptualizing that. And that allows us to think about the future in the age of generative AI. What is the future for the L&D department, where it sits usually in a business, how it serves the board, how it serves a vision, how it serves a strategy for a business in a way that hopefully is going to be robust and provides the skills and the people and all of these things for the business to work. And that's the reason for conceptualizing it like that, is that recently, last couple of years, we've had the boom of Gen AI, and we've had the talk of threat and disruption to nearly every profession. So how do professions need to reconfigure themselves to maximize the use of whatever the current technologies are that we have access to? But also, how do functions like L&D need to upskill, change, transform for the future that we have? So what do you think the future is for L&D when we think about non-traditional value chains, when we think about the evolution of business because of generative AI?
Yeah. Look, I've been in the business for 18 years now. I'm getting old. So when I started off as a Cisco networking trainer, like professional networking. I thought like MPLS, the British Telecom. And back then it was all physical on-site classes. You flew places, it was exciting. Then COVID suddenly sped up things and everything moved online, and we suddenly moved to Zoom and Microsoft Teams and all those online platforms. And then we saw a huge uptick in all those, I call them content supermarkets, the plural sites, the Udemy's of the world, where you just pay a couple of hundreds of dollars and then you get access, or your employees get access to hundreds or thousands of classes. Well, throughout this time, we've been doing experiments and trying to understand how we can automate as much as possible the human tutors, the human trainers. So nothing worked until March 2023, when OpenAI released GPT-4, and the GPT-4 class models allows us to do things which were previously unheard of, kind of like sci-fi. The way it looks now is that we'll be able to automate a big chunk of what trainers used to do, automate a big chunk of the content delivery part. Even think about avatars, about interactive avatars which are personalizing to everyone. We'll potentially be able to solve Bloom's two sigma problem, so provide the dream of a personalized tutor to everyone. Eventually, I think that things will not stop there, and there's already companies which are moving beyond this. So we are already working on things like personalization to everyone around this, with this avatar which speaks with language, with voice, every conceivable language on earth. But we're also looking at things like computer use, because if you take a look at least I come from the space of technical and management upskilling, you probably have 60% of content delivery in a macro learning experience, which would be like a training. It used to be like a 3 to 5 day class where people sat into a room, then it would be online. You have like 60% of content delivery where trainer delivers something, and then 40% is what we call labs. And those labs, those used to be lugging servers and Cisco routers and switches all over the place, putting them into a rack, cabling them, and so on. That was like 15 years ago. Then it became virtual machines, and now you can access those virtual machines from everywhere. However, now with models with computer use, you can actually look at what an instructor is doing. You can record everything, and we're looking at emulating this and providing a machine which actually allows us to show people how things are being done. Then the other major thing is we can track every interaction with our platform, but I'm sure there's others as well, and correlate this potentially down the line with KPIs about which the company cares about. So we're no longer just looking at all kinds of studies and questionnaires at the end of the class, but rather really correlating training or upskilling on reskilling initiatives with return on investment. So you know when you invest your earned pounds or dollars or euros, where you're putting this. That's my view. But then the key thing is, I may sound a little bit pessimist here. I'm sorry if I offend someone in the audience, but I really think that we are going to face some very interesting challenges for quite a lot of people who will not be able to adapt. Maybe because of a fault of their own, may not be because of a fault of their own. And that could be that their organization doesn't adapt properly. They don't adapt their job and what their tasks are and their job description quickly enough, because we will get to the point where once you train the machine how to do a certain thing and it's able to show others how to do the thing, then at one point of time, someone probably with a financial function might ask themselves, all right, why do we really need so many humans doing this job? And that's what we already see with call centers, BPO outsourcing. That's already happening there, but it's a wave, and it's really a function in someone's Microsoft Excel in the budgeting, trying to understand whether they want to automate this. So we will have some kind of a crisis of an ego crisis, if I may. That's what I think will happen.
There are a number of quite interesting points there, so I'll just pick them up as in the order that I remember them.
Sure.
But the first one is, you mentioned Bloom's 2 sigma problem. I don't think we need to go into that now. We both understand that. But for anybody who's watching, if you don't understand that, there will be an explainer video on the channel after that. The second thing is time-wise. So we are recording this at the end of March 2025. The
24th.
Release date of this, yeah. And then the release date of this will be sometime in the future, editing and all of that stuff. And one of the things that I gave a webinar on this in the middle of March, and I also have a blog article coming out towards the end of March, which is on the paradigm of SCORM. So SCORM is the effectively standard file format and data standard for LMSs, learning management systems. And we have this exciting capability with generative AI to have conversational data, so sentiment and semantic analysis and things like that. And what you're talking about is along the lines of examining generative AI capability to think differently about what we do. Now, one of the barriers, I think, to radical transformation, not just iterative, but radical transformation in this space, is the reliance on some of these older sort of models, frameworks, data standards, file formats, this kind of thing. When we start to think about virtual tutors and we have sort of generative AI support capabilities and we have the ability to potentially replace some trainers, we have the big beast in the room is when or if ever are we going to be able to move away from this completion checkmark as a data standard towards new types of data which allow us to get better insight into how people interact and how people behave. In the virtual tutor space that you're talking about, is there a move towards different types of data?
Tough one. There's a lot of vested interests in there. And there's a lot of companies which are playing in this space. Honestly, SCORM is a format which me and a bunch of friends of mine, we've been waiting for its death for 20 years now.
Yeah.
Plus minus. I guess it's here to stay. I mean, the way we adapted our product is we just decided to develop kind of a vacuum cleaner so it can ingest everything and work with all kinds of textual data and whole websites and audio and video and all that, embed this into a vector database and lots of metadata, lots of tagging, proprietary algorithms and so on. It's kind of a MacGyverish solution. There's a lot of duct tape included into building this because we're assembling it as we are delivering projects to customers. but I don't think there is anything new in terms of new types of data. Maybe in the future, but we'll see. I mean, I can't honestly, I can't wait for some next generation of. There wouldn't be large language models anymore, but rather world models, which would understand the physical world around us, and then the next generation of robotics. That'll be interesting, and then we'll need new types of data. But we're talking a couple of years down the line. Not too many, not 10, less than 10.
I mean, we used to say this with the Internet of Things revolution and, smart sensors and, how we get different types of data from that. But I think the conversation has shifted towards generative AI because it's impacting knowledge workers more than, some of the other stuff, which was impacting, maintenance workers or people who have more physical jobs.
Nobody was expecting this, were we? We were expecting AI to be doing some of the so-called boring jobs, and then we thought that computer programmers and all the knowledge workers were safe, and it turned out to be the exact opposite.
But that's what's so exciting, right? That we have whole-scale disruption, and it's up to us to think about what it is that we do with that disruption. So for me, that's very exciting. So on that point of sort of the transformation, you mentioned workforce displacement. So there are people who've been in their roles, delivering training, standing up with PowerPoints for many, many years, who, from what we're talking about, might perceive that there is a threat to their role. What should they do?
That's very deep conversation. One I've been having iterations of pretty much on a daily basis. But really, if you look at the business, and especially the line of business where I come from, which is vendor technology enablement classes, which is, you can look at it in the frame of a technological propaganda in some sort, because you have like those monstrous multi-billion companies which are enabling their partners to work with their solutions in a better way. This business, it was essentially the same ever since IBM invented the mainframe. It was just a different type of slides. The slides were physical, but then they moved to PowerPoint and so on. It's been ripe for disruption for years now. My thought is that the role of the trainer, tutor, instructor, whatever you want to call the person, is going to change a bit. And it's no longer going to be about content delivery, but rather about coaching people, about helping them, motivating them, about kind of merging training with consulting, which was already happening in some of the closed group classes where you do a training just for one group. So anything which is repetitive, which can be defined and is covered by some documentation, some form of a documentation, be it a book or a presentation or a video recording of the class, all that is covered by the AI agent, or we call them personas because they're multi-agentic. Actually, they have some kind of an internal thought. So once you do that, you're left with a real filter for the really good instructors who can provide unique value to their customers, and that will unfortunately mean that we'll have to drop some people. That's the reality. They will have to adapt, but the rest, the ones who will be with us after this transformation, they'll be able to charge more for their time, and they'll be doing a much more interesting job for a wider variety of customers, and they'll have more freedom. So in essence, we'll be able to kind of clone them, build either virtual copies of them, or build a cumulative trainer on a specific topic, which will be a combination of the best trainers with their materials and so on. So that's what I think will happen for not just for professional training and upskilling. I really think this is the future of school teachers, of university professors as well. Why should we be doomed to some subpar teacher? I mean, I'm sure you've suffered the same. I mean, I'm sure everyone who's viewing this has suffered the same. Tens of years of our lives using subpar instructors. Why? Why do we need to do that in 2025?
So there are a number of implications for that, right? Because first of all, I'm usually a fan of things that help us to somehow sort out the best from the mediocre, right? I think that's always going to be valuable. We have, of course, the potential for change in terms of business models, employment models, and things like that, where we say, well, actually, no company will ever employ a trainer now, because what we have is a sector could have access to the best. The medical sector could have the access to the best medical trainers. And that would be a cohort of people, and you can effectively crowdsource that, or that leads to fractional employment and things like that, which unfortunately means that the people who are not the best, not the top whatever percent, 16% of a normal distribution, those top people are going to get the jobs, and the people who don't have the skills are not going to be employed. That leads to a societal consideration, and that societal consideration is the displacement of people and employment from AI. And that opens the door to things like, well, what should we do about universal basic income? So how do we make sure that everybody's got enough to eat, has access to resources, and all of these things? Is there an easy solution to this? Probably not. But what do you think?
I don't think there is an easy solution to this. But I'm really surprised that in 2025 we are still pointing news at each other, whereas this is the only thing which should be bothering us. This is the biggest opportunity of our lifetime. We can literally change the course of our civilization over a couple of years. And it's not like it's something new. I spent the whole summer of 2013 in the NASA Ames Research Park in a place called the Singularity University. I was there it was led by Ray Kurzweil, Peter Diamandis, Ben Gyortzel, who I think invented the term AGI, was there delivering a lecture, mingling with us. And we were looking at, all right, what are the implications on this in our businesses, in our technological businesses, but also on society. And because AI is not just like a technology which happens somewhere in a vacuum. It's going to be everywhere. There isn't going to be software anymore. I mean, there already isn't. I mean, if you take a look at software development companies, already a big chunk of the software is being produced by AI, and the judgment stays with the humans, with tools like Cursor and Windsurf. So that's going to happen everywhere. We're going to be able to program life itself. So it's a big question. And honestly, I'm a little bit worried that I don't hear this on the news. At least the people in power who I know here and there, mainly talking continental Europe here, there isn't a proper discussion about this. Like we're just talking about daily stuff, which is, yes, it is important, but there isn't a proper discussion. So honestly, my answer to you is I don't know. However, I'm sure you've read there was a study funded by OpenAI, by Sam Altman, I think personally, on UBI, and they gave certain cohorts of people, I think it was $1,000 per month for a considerable amount of time. Nothing happened. There wasn't a change in any of the parameters which they were monitoring. And I really think that we have this innate need for some kind of a meaning, for our own need to feel that we're doing something meaningful, to have a purpose, if you wish, in life, find spirituality of some sort, if you want. So those are really big questions. There is no question that the Earth, as it is, if we stop bickering with each other, can feed the population. The population is going down anyway. Once you get civilized, you have less kids. That's very clear. And we'll have the problem of not having enough humans quite soon, rather than we're already seeing this all over Europe and sure the UK as well.
Yeah.
So that's going to be a big problem. I think automation should play a big role here, especially with robotics, because when you take a look at the plans of companies like Unitree, like Tesla with their robots, like Figure, they have these impressive demos, and all of them are thinking of having billions of humanoid robots. So there should be some kind of a tax on robotics. But at the same time, we're looking at a future where really intelligence, what we call intelligence, might be privatized. It already is, maybe, by a couple of companies, like 5 or 6 companies. And who's playing a role in this in our part of the pond? Mistral in France, maybe? Who else? So it's going to be interesting. I certainly hope it doesn't end in a disastrous way. Ray Kurzweil's predictions were we're going to get general intelligence by 2029, and we're going to get a singularity type of an event by 2045. So we are talking about this interval of time, by his predictions, 15, 16 years. I think we're moving actually a bit faster than his predictions. So we're going to get what we call AGI probably next year. If not this year, for a lot of the jobs. And we're going to see that with a wholly unprepared society, with a wholly unprepared government system. So I hope there is someone who's smart and in a position of power listening to this and similar podcasts and reading books and articles and paying attention, really, not being a populist.
Yeah, I mean, for me, the problem is it nearly always comes back to the thing of normal distribution, and that is that we cannot. Well, we have market forces and normal distributions. These two things mean that you have a premium on the things that doesn't everybody doesn't have. If something is scarce, skills are scarce, knowledge is scarce, whatever it is that's scarce, commands a premium. And we might be in a situation where the old way of doing things is that the skills command a premium, but you also have everybody else somehow does find gainful employment, even if they're not in uh, the top 16% or 20% that get the work. But we're moving towards a state where actually the difference would be that if you're not in that top tier, you're not actually required in employment because all of those things can be done by machines to some degree. And we have other aspects of scarcity, like do we have enough raw materials to make billions of robots? Who knows? Maybe not. Metals and precious metals and all of these things are mined in different parts of the world. So, China does have a monopoly on certain things because you only find them in the mines in China. So they therefore have a competitive advantage compared to the countries that don't have those particular precious metals. So you have these different things in the mix that will change what's being done and where it's being done and where the impacts are. But yeah, it's these kinds of things we're not prepared, I find, we're not prepared even to admit in companies. If we bring this back to companies for a second.
Yes. We're not even having a proper discussion about this.
Well, if you take the L&D space, which is probably most of the people watching this, one of the things that I've been grappling with for many years is that we always kind of say, well, if we have learning interventions, then what we will be able to do is we will move the entirety of a company's population into the skilled part of the normal distribution. And that seems to be a fallacy. That seems to be something that why would we even expect that that's a possibility? We can expect that the curve and the mean would move, but you will still get outliers on either side. You will still get standard deviation from the mean in terms of the population of capability. So the thing that we target in the learning space should be to move the mean rather than to try and make everybody an outlier. Because if everybody's an outlier, nobody's an outlier, right? So there's this concept of saying, well, we'll make everybody amazing by just putting them in a classroom or giving them a kind of digital intervention or something like that. We can help shift the needle, but we kind of need to be realistic about our expectations because people are variable. And because people are variable, it means you will get variation in the things that you do and the outcomes that you expect. And I don't think even that conversation is something that we are real about in our industries. If we apply AI to a lot of this stuff and we start to automate and we start to change what that looks like, then yes, we do move the needle in both ways. We improve performance of who's left and we potentially exit the ones that aren't performing to that level. So on the point of automation, we have a number of potential outcomes. So let's say we have agentic workflows, AI, we have automation, we have all of these things that a company can implement. And those things will have impacts on performance. Those things will have impacts on satisfaction, on motivation, on how people work, how people perform. How do we balance these things, the implementation of AI with the human factors of satisfaction, dissatisfaction, motivation, all of these things?
That's a really tough question, Ash. I'm sure you've heard the story, and there's a lot of people preaching it, myself included, that it's all going to be about looking at the growth of soft skills, the ability for us to develop critical thinking, further develop our critical thinking, teamwork within hybrid teams of humans and AI. Yes, that's all true. However, it's just a matter of time for many cases where we are not going to need the humans anymore. So let's take a look at computer developers. There is already this crisis of junior developers. It's well known. There's a lot of studies within, let's say, in the US, the crisis at the bottom. We don't need, as companies, junior developers now, because our mid-level developers using AI tools, we can move the median there for all of them. Just give a mid-skilled developer a tool like Cursor or Windsurf and let them go with their vibe coding or whatever is going to be modern next week by the time we publish this, because it changes quite rapidly. And they become suddenly very good. It happened within our company. We actually removed some junior contractor roles. We don't need those anymore, and they became a software subscription. So this is real, and this is already happening within many organizations, especially in the BPO sector. My honest thought: we really have to look at what makes us human and what drives us. I'm not sure whether it's Maslow's pyramid. I'm not sure whether it's a pyramid even, because you may argue it's flat. And then take a look at our building structures of society, of what is a human society, what is important for humans, what's important for us. What is our box? When we say think outside the box, well, the box is our societal norms, the box is our culture, our family. So what's within the box which defines you, me, everyone else? And really try to provide help. I was a part of a discussion yesterday with some really interesting entrepreneurs. A couple of them run like what you'd call a unicorn, even though that term doesn't seem to be popular in some areas anymore. And the major topic really was mindfulness, psychological well-being. And you wouldn't believe the things we were discussing. It was ranging from all kinds of religion, so no discrimination there, everybody's welcome, to shamanistic ceremonies, to rituals, ayahuasca rituals and whatnot, just in order to find meaning. Because that's all a bunch of people who see this and maybe see a bit further than most of humanity, but we are going to have to reevaluate what makes us human. And I'm fairly sure that for some part of humanity, of our Western capitalistic society, if I may, it might be that the definition of our ego, when we meet each other, I'd say, hey, I'm an entrepreneur. You'd say, hey, I'm an advisor, investor. Someone else is an architect and someone else is a computer developer. Right. What happens once those are subscriptions or free tier OpenAI or Anthropic subscriptions? Well, what's left? What does define a human? That's a conversation we're not having. That's a very deep conversation, existential level conversation, which is it's above and beyond what L&D is. But L&D can play a critical role here because it touches everyone within the current structures of their functions.
So I think there are two separate takes on that, right? So one is learning itself as an innate human condition, a thing that we all do from the first moment as a child. You go and touch the hot thing and you learn that it's hot and that it hurts, all the way through to the end of your life, where you keep having to adapt to the circumstances that you have. Learning, we all learn. Is there a department in a company that should own the processes around cognitive development? That's a very different question, because that's a corporate function. That's an enterprise risk management function. That's something that you do for competitive advantage or whatever it is. There are reasons to go and do that. Mm-hmm. And I think that is a very different question. But the question of what are we going to do? I wonder if we're having, as a society, as a species, we're kind of having a lot of existential crises at the moment.
Yes,
and I first noticed this when was it? It was maybe 10 years ago, maybe a little longer than that. I was doing boot camps. So, you go and instead of going to the gym, or maybe as well as going to the gym, for me, I like to go and lift weights, and, that's a thing that I like. And I went through a phase where I was doing these boot camps where you run around, you flip tires,
wow. Okay.
Go under the little cones, and, you do some kind of wriggling on your arms, military style, to try and get from here to there. And it was quite a lot of people were doing this at the time. And they used to have this thing, I don't know if they still have it, Tough Mudder, where you go and you wriggle around in the mud like a military obstacle course. And at the time I was reflecting and I was thinking, as knowledge workers, we're having this kind of crisis where, we don't use our bodies. We don't feel like we use our bodies. We sit at a desk and we type. And that means that we therefore have to think of more extreme ways to try and use our bodies, because you don't use it, you lose it, you atrophy. And so people are trying to think of, how do I recover this? And then you have things like the caveman diet, where, people are trying to get back to some kind of roots, ancestral roots. So you have crisis after crisis after crisis, and people are doing more and more extreme things. And it occurred to me when you were talking about the kind of shamanistic rituals that people might go through for well-being and things like that. Is that also an indicator of a crisis that we're having? So somehow we're not focusing on our well-being, so we need to take some kind of more extreme way of doing that. What do you think?
100%. I think it's everything is a compensatory mechanism, and I can only relate to that. I personally train Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu every day, no days off, including weekends, for the past 7 years. I've been doing that. Before it was other martial arts. I got older and I decided I don't want to be punched in the head. But I can only relate to that, and it's been like this for 20 plus years. So, and yes, look, what I'm saying is there is a bunch of ways you can try to fix your brain, fix your hormones, fix whatever situation you think might be your normal, baseline. It goes off. We're all stressed, we're all underslept, we're all drinking too much coffee, we're all being disrupted, and there's a bunch of ways to do that. Spirituality might be one. Somebody might find a meaning in religion, having some kind of a discovery there. Somebody might find it in shamanistic ceremonies. What I'm saying is I think all those compensate for us not being what we're designed to be. Because think of it this way: what's the hardware difference between you, me, and someone who lived 10,000 years ago? There is none. I mean, I guess we're weaker as bodies because we're just not out. But in terms of hardware, it's the same. It's the same lung volume, brain volume, heart, everything is the same. However, we've changed our lives over the past, since 200 years, plus minus, since the Industrial Revolution. We're sitting more and more, and our work is becoming more and more cognitively heavy. So the end result is I'm sure most of us, not all, but most of us will get disrupted, and it's just a question of time. If you look at even IQ tests, O1 Pro, which was released by OpenAI, December? Now it's available in the API for some kind of extortion amount of money. But I'm sure they're preparing us for something even more expensive. I mean, it's available since last night or 2 days ago, whatever. It has an IQ of 120 if you give it an IQ test, which puts it's already smarter than most people. So if we take a look at Moore's law, and the saying is that we now have AI models doubling at 3 times Moore's law, basically saying we have a doubling of price performance every 6 months or so. It doesn't matter if it's 6 months or 8 months or a year. Longer term, it's the same. So we'll have to adapt. We'll have to find our compensatory mechanisms. I'm fairly sure it will have to do in some way, shape, or form with physical movement. It's something which is natural. We're not a brain which is disconnected from the body. It's an integrated system. It's not like it's two separate things, even though we like to think about it. So we got to think about things more holistically and implement whatever mindfulness techniques work for us or work for our company or culture or are acceptable, because some of them are not acceptable in Western society, but completely okay in other societies.
Yeah. I was thinking while you were talking, there was another example, and that example was, I was on a call with somebody, and I can't remember who it was, but they were telling me that they're doing white-collar boxing, which is another one of these mechanisms of compensating for something lacking in the knowledge work.
What is white-collar boxing?
It's where you get people who work in offices,
okay,
who then decide they're going to get into the ring and fight each other.
Also, like real boxing.
Real boxing, okay. Yeah. So if you're an office worker, Dave from accounting, right? And you say, you know what, I've had enough of this accounting log. It's effectively Fight Club, right? I'm going to go and train for a fight, and I'm going to have a fight with somebody.
Yeah.
People who wouldn't otherwise have been doing that. So yeah, there are lots of these sort of compensation mechanisms out there, I think, which are interesting. But the reason I mention it is that as we start to see a lot more impact in this space, we start to see a lot more people displaced. We have the potential for our society and our culture to take a lot more extreme ways of coping with that. So we don't know what they will be, but it's foreseeable that there's going to be some kind of backlash, some kind of mechanism for coping.
Yeah, that's what worries me a little bit, because I'm originally from Bulgaria, which is a country which it used to be a socialist country until 35-36 years ago, something like that. We see hybrid warfare there, And, let me ask you this. How many personalized AI chatbots using a social network which impersonate your aunt or cousin would it take to collapse let's say, the banking system of a country? Because
It depends on the
depends on the
country, but
country. Yeah.
it's probably less than I.
Yeah, but it's cheap. It's a cheap exercise, and it's getting exponentially cheaper. So manipulation is one of the things which does worry me, because all those technologies which allow us to personalize learning journeys and build those AI tutors, and they would be really nice. I mean, you'd be able to talk to like the best subject matter expert. The same thing can happen with comments in social networks. You can get a call from a cloned voice. There's companies like HeyGen and Synthesia, which are producing nearly photorealistic quality avatars. So, it's an API call to them. It's not like rocket science. You just need a couple of developers. So
Yeah,
that really worries me.
On that point, for people who are following, I have a paper coming out sometime this year, really, trust me. It's generative AI in synthetic humans, and what the impacts are, covering things like governance, deepfakes, societal risk, the ability of the population to discriminate between what is true and what is not true. Things like, obviously, fact-checking and copyright are in there as well. So I've been going through this research for quite a while. I do use the API calls to some of these different softwares more for testing than anything else. So yes, I am real, if anybody was asking. I got asked this last week on a webinar. Am I real? It's like,
yeah.
Yes, I'm real. For now, I'm real. But anyway, so these things are, you're right. These things are absolutely out there, and there are foreseeable issues. And one of the things that companies need to deal with is, as we move more and more into either automating or using AI to produce materials that we then give to the workforce and say, accept this because it's come from a particular channel, we're going to see an erosion in the capability of people not only to discriminate between what is AI generated and what isn't, but we're also going to see an erosion in people's abilities to do the things that we were talking about, that between us, you mentioned things like critical thinking and problem solving.
Yeah.
Those, for me, are also skills that lie on a normal distribution. So not everybody has those skills, and it's a fallacious sort of assertion to say that we expect humans are great at critical thinking, and that's what they will do, and the machines will go and do something else. Yeah, that doesn't work for me, right? So we have to think, as you've said, about what are the humans actually going to do?
Well, the problem of cognitive offloading is there, and the solution I've been preaching to anyone really is trying to use personalized AI tools. So try to give your employees the tools which are based on the latest and greatest models, but are also fine-tuned to what you want to achieve, to the learning objectives, or say they may play within in the workflow. So we can have an AI tutor which is a part of your Microsoft Teams integration, so you can talk to it and it can help you, but it has to be narrowed down, so it's not like a generic tool which can do everything, because then we already see the risk, and there's a bunch of papers showing this very clearly. If we use, let's call it shadow AI, I believe this term is gaining popularity now. Like we used to have shadow IT when people were using Dropbox, even though it was not allowed by the company, just because it was easy. Now we have shadow AI. I mean, a lot of people within companies will not tell you officially that they're using whatever AI tool, pick your preferred one, but they are. And if you don't have an AI strategy within the company, they're just going to use whatever they have, and then they'll have this cognitive offloading, and their critical thinking skills will get even worse. And I'm not saying they're great. I don't believe there's a hidden genius within all of us. I mean, we've been sleeping for the better part of 30 years now, and I can't multiply 3-digit numbers in my head. I've had a calculator for all my life, and it's going to be the same for many of the things which are being. I really doubt like the next generation will be able to write a proper essay without using the grandson of or granddaughter of ChatGPT. So
that's probably true, but it gives us pause to think about some of these things. This kind of takes me to a slightly different perspective, right? And one eye on time. We're gonna end on a slightly lighter note, right? But
super.
Before I do that, I will say that the point on AI strategy, I am an AI strategist, so if anybody's watching and they're wondering what AI strategy is, don't hesitate to reach out. I would say not only shadow AI, but also things like AI exclusivity, where you say in a company, nobody's going to use any AI apart from the ones we've implemented. It has an impact on skills, of course. And then you have in the middle, you have like the bring your own AI kind of model where you say, well, we're going to sanction a bunch of different things, but it's up to you to bring whatever it is that you want. It's kind of like bring your own device style strategies, but you got to make a choice as what works for your company. But it's something that is part of a strategic thought process that you need to consider. Governance and all of these things come along with that. So let's end on a slightly lighter note. Right, you and I have been talking for a while, and we both found out the other day when we were talking, we are fans of Rick and Morty, right?
Yes.
Which is one of the great sci-fi cartoons out there. It does touch on some of these issues. They do deal with some of these things. So in the context of AI, let's think about that. Do you have, doesn't have to be Rick and Morty, it could be anything else, but do you have any pop culture kind of references where you've watched something and you've thought now that, you know, that we see that playing out in real time. These issues are real. That was really prescient, you know?
You know, the Rick and Morty is obviously one of the greatest ones, and they have so many episodes. I'd say season 1 and season 2. By the way, if you haven't watched them, I'm talking to the audience here, 20-minute episodes, it's not a waste of time. It's really, you're seeing the future. But I'd also say The Matrix, the first one, Ghost in the Shell. It's a 1995-6-ish Japanese anime. We're already seeing this. And the latest one I saw was on Netflix, and it spoke about uploaded humans. That was the big thing there. And so it's not about AI, but really about combining AI with human intelligence and building bunches of, so combining human intelligences and what the future is going to look like during the singularity, post-singularity. I won't spoil it for you. It's called Pantheon, 2 seasons on Netflix. It was amazing. I really find it very inspiring. Apart from that, I'd say the Three-Body Problem, the trilogy from Liu Cixin, but the book, they've only shot 1 season. Again, I think it was on Netflix. It's kind of simplified, but it's okay-ish. But, I really find for the past 2 years that science fiction has been lagging behind reality. The things I see, the things I can run locally on a computer or somewhere in the cloud, and the things I was advising a hackathon for high school kids the other day, the things they're building within a couple of days, they were science fiction 10 years ago. You couldn't do this. Even if someone gave you like a couple of million, half a year to develop it, you couldn't. And now it's just API calls to this and that. So look, I think it may have been a bit of a pessimistic conversation. I think it was actually realistic. But what I really think is we have the biggest opportunity of our lifetime, because all those models, all those tools, they allow us to be creators. Yes, in the future we might not have companies of hundreds of thousands of people. The size of the organization which produces some kind of an impact on society will definitely go down. We're already seeing this. We'll get to 1, 2, 3, 5, 10 people, unicorn companies. But every single one of us can be a creator. And if we're moving into a situation where most of the world we exist in is already virtual, we'll get to photorealistic VR, AR sometime very soon. Combined with robotics, it means all of us can create in a multitude of worlds. We're not going to be limited to one physical reality. We will be able to exist and create within those worlds, and it's not necessary that our services are paid in pounds, on euros, or dollars. They can be paid in Roblox. Robux, I think was the name. My daughter is buying these. So yeah, I think we're facing. Yeah, it's going to be challenging, but we'll adapt. I mean, that's what we've been doing for the past how many hundreds of thousands of years as like a species.
Absolutely. So the key takeaway, if you're watching this and you're in the L&D space, or you're in marketing, or you're in something that involves creative endeavors, something that enables you to create things, one of the key things there is, if we have a future where we can all be creators and we have technology that enables us or facilitates the process of creation, what needs to change in your business for you to be able to, for example, create with the efficiency of a YouTuber, who has an idea, makes a video, puts it online in like a couple of days, versus the 12, 15, 16 weeks cycles that mean that you're creating something in your company. What's the gap? What's the difference? What needs to change? And how do you get there to the point where you are able to leverage the technology that we have in the same agility that a small business or a creator would? So ask yourself that question. This has been one of those really insightful conversations. So Theo, thank you so much for being here. If you're watching this on YouTube, don't forget to like and subscribe. If you're watching this on Spotify, don't forget to follow the channel. There will be updates on all of the social platforms, so Insta, LinkedIn, Facebook. So make sure you follow on those channels as well. But for now, thank you everybody for listening. Thank you, Theo. And
thank you.
see you later.
See you later.